The morning began quietly with soft sunlight stretching across the neighborhood lawns of Portland, Oregon. The air carried the scent of damp leaves and coffee, the kind of peaceful stillness that comes after a week of rain. Evelyn Parker, 48, stood by her kitchen window, sipping her morning coffee as she looked out at her small garden. The hydrangeas she planted years ago had started to bloom again, pale blue and delicate. Life around her seemed to move on quietly, steadily, just like it always had. When the mail truck stopped outside her house, Evelyn almost ignored it. The mail was rarely exciting: bills, grocery flyers, the occasional letter from her insurance company. But something about the small cream-colored envelope caught her eye when she opened the box. Her name was written in a handwriting she knew instantly: neat. Slanted letters that carried the same energy as the boy who used to write notes for her on sticky paper before leaving for school. Ethan. Her heart lifted before she even opened it. Her son, Ethan Parker, had moved to Chicago 6 months ago after getting a job at an architecture firm. He called every week, sometimes sent her photos of the city skyline, or funny pictures of the stray cat that always followed him to the train. But a letter this was different. It felt intentional, personal, something that took effort. Evelyn ran her fingers over the envelope for a moment, almost afraid to open it. Then she slid her thumb under the seal and pulled out a folded sheet of thick paper. Inside, she saw just a few lines written in Ethan's familiar style. "Mom, there's someone I want you to meet. Someone who reminds me a lot of Dad. And of you. Please say yes. Dinner. Friday night." That was all. No explanation. No signature beyond his usual little doodle of a smiley face in the corner. Evelyn read it twice, her mind instantly trying to piece together what it meant. Someone who reminded him of Michael. Her late husband's name alone was enough to tighten her chest. It had been 12 years since Michael's passing, 12 years of quiet days. Birthdays celebrated with just Ethan, and evenings filled with the echo of what used to be laughter. She had learned to keep moving, one small step at a time, filling her days with work, her garden, and her son's milestones. Love had become something that lived only in her memories, a warm place she didn't dare visit too often. But now, reading Ethan's letter, she felt a stir deep inside. A question. A possibility. Why would her son arrange a dinner? Who could this person be? Evelyn folded the note carefully, as if it were something fragile. She placed it on the counter, but her thoughts couldn't stay still. Maybe Ethan wanted to introduce her to someone important in his life, a boss, a friend, maybe even someone he was dating. But the line about Dad confused her. Ethan didn't talk about his father often. Not because he didn't care, but because the memories were too gentle, too sacred to touch. She went about her morning as usual, but her mind kept circling back to the letter. When she washed the dishes, she caught herself staring out the window, lost in thought. When she folded laundry, she realized she'd folded the same towel twice. Even when she went for her afternoon walk through the park, her steps carried a quiet, nervous rhythm. Evelyn wasn't someone who liked surprises. Life had given her enough of them already, the good ones short-lived, the painful ones lasting longer than they should. But something in Ethan's words made her curious. Please say yes. It didn't sound like a request. It sounded like a gift. That evening she called Ethan, pretending it was just to check in, but he seemed unusually cheerful. "Hey, Mom, got my letter?" asked. She smiled softly. "I did." "You're being mysterious. Who is this person I'm supposed to meet?" Ethan laughed, that same laugh that used to fill the house when he was a child. "You'll see. Just trust me, okay? Friday night, I'll text you the restaurant, Ethan." She started, but he cut her off gently. "Mom, you always say life's too short not to take a chance. I think it's time you take one." When the call ended, Evelyn sat in silence for a long time. The house felt both familiar and strange, too quiet, too neat. She looked at the framed photo on the mantel. Michael with his arm around her, Ethan between them, no older than 10. They had been at the coast that day, wind in their hair, laughter caught mid-frame. She remembered the sound of Michael's voice, steady, reassuring. The way he always made her feel like everything would be okay. She touched the edge of the frame and whispered, "He's grown into you, Michael, always trying to take care of me." Friday felt closer than she wanted it to. The days in between blurred work, errands, calls from neighbors. But in quiet moments, she found herself thinking about what to wear, what the restaurant might be like, who this mysterious someone could be. She scolded herself for caring, yet she couldn't stop. It had been years since she'd gone anywhere that wasn't a family gathering or a work event by Thursday night. She stood in front of her mirror, trying on dresses she hadn't worn in years. Some felt too formal, others too dull. Finally, she chose a simple navy blue one that fit just right, not too young, not too old. She pinned her hair loosely, touched up her lipstick. And for the first time in a long while, she looked at herself and thought, maybe I'm still allowed to look nice. When Friday came, the city was covered in a light drizzle. She drove downtown, the windshield wipers swaying rhythmically, her heart beating faster with every block. She found the restaurant Isly, a small, warm-looking place with golden lights glowing through the windows as she parked. She caught her reflection in the rearview mirror and smiled nervously. She wasn't sure what she was walking into, but she trusted Ethan. Her son had never led her wrong before getting out. She reached into her purse and took out the letter again. The paper was slightly crumpled from how many times she had unfolded it during the week. She read the words one last time, tracing the ink with her fingertip. Someone who reminds me of Dad. And of you. Those words stayed in her mind as she walked toward the entrance, the doorbell chiming softly as she stepped inside. Warm light, soft music, and the faint smell of garlic and wine filled the air. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt a strange flutter in her chestnut. Fear, not sadness. But something she hadn't felt in so long she barely recognized it. Hope, and as she spotted Ethan, sitting in the corner of the restaurant, waving at her with that same boyish grin she loved. She realized whatever this dinner was about, it was going to change something. Maybe even everything. She straightened her shoulders, took a quiet breath, and walked toward her son, none aware that the letter she'd opened days ago was the beginning of a chapter she never expected to live again. The restaurant glowed softly. Warm light bouncing off brick walls and candlelit tables. Evelyn Parker hesitated by the entrance for a moment, scanning the room. Then she spotted her son, Nathan, waving her over from a corner booth. Relief washed over her. She smiled, adjusting her purse on her shoulder as she walked toward him. "Mom, you made it," Ethan said, standing to hug her. His energy was bright, a little too bright. She noticed the way his eyes flicked toward the man sitting across the table. And her curiosity spiked. "Of course I did," she said lightly, taking her seat. "You don't write mysterious letters every day." Ethan grinned, but didn't answer right away. "Mom, this is Daniel Moore," he said finally, turning to the man. "Daniel, this is my mother, Evelyn." The stranger rose slightly from his seat and extended his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Parker." His voice was calm, low, and sincere. Evelyn shook his hand, feeling the quiet strength in his grip. He looked to be in his early 50s, salt and pepper hair, kind eyes behind square glasses, and a faint trace of a smile that seemed to carry patience rather than charm. "The pleasure's mine," she replied politely, though she couldn't hide her curiosity. "So, Daniel, how do you know my son?" Ethan leaned forward before Daniel could answer. "He's my mentor at work, Mom. He's been helping me with my projects, and, well, he's kind of become a friend, too." Evelyn smiled. "That's wonderful, Ethan. It's good to have people like that around." Dinner began smoothly. The waiter brought menus, and the three of them talked about small things: work, the city, the food. But Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that something was going on beneath the surface. Ethan seemed restless, glancing at his phone now and then, smiled just a little too practiced. Daniel, however, seemed perfectly at ease. He asked Evelyn about her work at the local library, how she liked living alone, what kind of books she read. His questions weren't nosy, they were thoughtful. He listened, really listened, and for some reason that unsettled her more than anything else. As the evening went on, the restaurant grew busier, filled with a low hum of laughter and clinking glasses. Evelyn found herself relaxing. Daniel was easy to talk to. He had a quiet way of drawing people in, of making her forget she was nervous. He told a few stories about traveling through small American towns for work, about how he liked to stop in old bookshops just to browse. At one point, he said, your son talks about you all the time, says you're the strongest person he knows. Evelyn felt a flush rise to her cheeks. He exaggerates, she said softly. Daniel shook his head. I don't think he does. Ethan smiled, watching them with a knowing expression. But just as Evelyn began to feel truly comfortable, his phone buzzed again. He frowned, checked the screen, and stood up. Evelyn leaned back, feeling the warmth rise in her chest, part embarrassment, part something she didn't have a name for. She hadn't realized Ethan paid that much attention. She hadn't realized anyone did. The waiter returned to refill their glasses. Outside, rain tapped softly against the window. The world felt small and calm. Evelyn found herself studying Daniel when he wasn't looking, the way he smiled politely at the waiter, the quiet way he stirred his drink, the slight sadness behind his eyes. There was something familiar about that look, something she recognized in herself. So, she said finally, trying to sound casual, did Ethan tell you to come here tonight? Daniel chuckled. He didn't have to try very hard. He said his mom was worth meeting. That was enough. His honesty startled her. Most people would have turned this into a joke or brushed it off, but Daniel said it as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Evelyn felt her pulse quicken, not in the way it once did with youthful excitement, but in a slower, steadier rhythm that came with understanding and being understood. When Ethan finally returned, his expression told her everything. He looked at them both, smiled knowingly, and said, "Sorry about that. The call took longer than I thought." Evelyn gave him a look that was half stern, half amused. "You planned this, didn't you?" Ethan pretended to look innocent. "Planned what?" "I just wanted you to meet someone who appreciates good conversation." Daniel hid a smile behind his glass. Evelyn shook her head but couldn't help laughing. "You're unbelievable," she told her son. The rest of dinner moved easily. The conversation drifted from music to travel to memories of childhood. Daniel shared a story about his teenage daughter, now in college. And Evelyn talked about Ethan's first art project that had left glue stains all over the dining table. It felt normal, unforced, like two old friends reconnecting. Even though they had only just met, when the check arrived, Daniel insisted on paying. "At least let me," he said, his voice kind but firm. "You can get the next one." The next one. Evelyn echoed, surprised by how natural it sounded. He smiled. "If you'd like." She didn't answer right away, but her silence carried a meaning both of them understood. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement, creating a quiet shimmer in the night. Ethan hugged his mother goodbye near her car. "Thank you for coming, Mom," he said softly. She looked at him, eyes narrowing in mock suspicion. "You set me up." He laughed. "Maybe I did. But you're smiling again? So I'd say it worked." When she turned back, Daniel was standing by his car across the lot, hands in his pockets, waiting politely before getting in. He gave her a small wave, a warm smile that said good night without a word as Evelyn drove home. She couldn't stop thinking about the calm in his eyes, the kindness in his voice, and the quiet pride in her son's plan. She had walked into that restaurant expecting dinner, but she left with something else, something she hadn't felt in years, a spark, a beginning. And somewhere deep inside, she realized that her son hadn't just introduced her to someone. He had opened a door she thought was locked forever. After that dinner, Evelyn Parker couldn't stop thinking about Daniel Moore. It wasn't love at first sight. She was too old, too careful for that, but there was something about him that lingered. Something calm and steady that stayed with her even after the night ended. For days, she replayed small moments in her mind. The way he listened without interrupting. How his eyes softened when he smiled. The quiet warmth in his voice when he said her name. She told herself it was nothing. Just a pleasant evening, a kind man, a clever son who enjoyed surprising her. But as the week went by, she found herself checking her phone more often, wondering if Daniel would reach out. Then one morning, while she was shelving books at the library, her phone buzzed. Danielle, would you like some company this Friday? I promised not to let your son plan it this time. Evelyn stared at the message for a long moment, smiling before she could stop herself. She typed back a simple, "Sure, dinner." His reply came seconds later. "Only if you let me bring dessert and music." Friday evening arrived quietly, with the faint smell of rain in the air. Evelyn had cleaned her small house more than necessary, fluffing pillows, lighting a candle, setting out plates she rarely used. She told herself it wasn't a date, just two people sharing food. But her heart didn't quite believe it. When Daniel arrived, he was holding a brown paper bag and an old record player. "I brought dinner," he said, lifting the bag and this old thing, "because your son told me you love jazz." Evelyn laughed, a sound that surprised even her. "He really does tell you everything, doesn't he? Only the important parts." Daniel replied with a smile. They ate simply homemade, pasta and salad, but it wasn't the food that made the evening special. It was the comfort between them, the easy flow of conversation. Daniel asked her about her favorite records, her favorite memories, the first book that ever made her cry. In return, he told her about his late wife, Laura, how they used to dance in their kitchen on Sunday mornings, how losing her had made the world quieter. Evelyn listened, not with pity, but with understanding. "I know that kind of quiet," she said softly. "It's the kind that settles into the walls, not just the heart." Daniel nodded. "Yes, that's exactly it." After dinner, he unpacked the record player and set it on her table. The vinyl he brought was old, the cover worn at the edges. When he placed the needle down, a gentle trumpet filled the room, smooth, warm, timeless. Evelyn closed her eyes, letting the music drift through her. It reminded her of evenings long ago when Michael would hum along to the radio while fixing something around the house. Without realizing it, she smiled. Daniel noticed. "You look like you're somewhere else," he said quietly. She opened her eyes. "Somewhere good," she admitted. "They didn't dance. They just sat there, listening, their words blending with the rhythm of the record. It wasn't awkward or forced. It was peaceful." When the song ended, Evelyn spoke first. "It's been a long time since someone brought music into this house." Daniel met her gaze. "Then maybe it's time to change that." His tone wasn't flirtatious. It was gentle, almost protective. It made her heart ache in the best way. Weeks passed and Friday nights slowly became their thing. Sometimes they cooked together. Sometimes they went for walks by the river. They talked about small things, books, family, memories, but there was always something deeper beneath it all. Evelyn began to realize that what she felt wasn't about excitement or passion. It was about peace, the kind of connection that comes from being truly seen. One evening, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset, Daniel said quietly, "Ethan's a good kid. He told me he worried about you being lonely." Evelyn smiled faintly. "He worries too much. I've learned to live with solitude." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "There's a difference between solitude and silence. One is peaceful. The other hurts." His words stayed with her long after he left that night. For years, Evelyn had told herself she was content, that she didn't need anyone, that her memories were enough. But now, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. The simple joy of being missed. Being asked about, being noticed. Still, she hesitated. Part of her felt guilty for even letting someone new into her life. Michael had been her first and only love. Could she really care for someone else without betraying that memory? She wrestled with that question for days, until one Sunday afternoon when Ethan called. "Mom, how's Daniel?" He asked casually, but she could hear the smile in his voice. "He's fine," she said, trying not to sound too pleased. "You like him, don't you?" Evelyn hesitated, then sighed. "He's kind, easy to talk to. But I don't know what this is supposed to be." Ethan chuckled softly. "Mom, it doesn't have to be anything yet. You've spent half your life giving everything to me and Dad. Maybe it's time to let someone give something back to you." His words were simple, but they broke something open in her. That night, Daniel came over again. He brought another record, something softer, slower. They sat together on the couch, the lights dim, rain pattering gently outside. Halfway through the song, Evelyn spoke. "Do you ever feel like you're cheating time?" she asked. "Like you shouldn't get another chance at this?" Daniel thought for a moment, then said quietly, "I used to. But then I realized love isn't about replacing someone. It's about remembering how to feel alive again." Evelyn looked at him, her throat tight with emotion. "You make it sound easy," smiled faintly. "It's not. But it's worth it." There was no grand moment, no sudden confession. Just the soft hum of music, the quiet between two people who understood loss and still chose to reach for warmth again. When he finally reached across the table to touch her hand, he didn't hold it tightly, he just let his fingers rest there. Enough to say you're not alone anymore, for the first time in 12 years. Evelyn didn't pull away. Later that night, after he left, she stood by her window watching the rain. The house didn't feel as empty anymore. The silence wasn't heavy, it was gentle, filled with the echo of laughter and the faint memory of jazz. She realized that healing didn't happen in sudden bursts. It came slowly, in moments like this: a shared meal, a quiet song, the warmth of someone who understood her heart without needing to fix it. When she looked at the photo of Michael on the mantel, she didn't feel guilt anymore. Instead, she whispered softly, "You'd like him." And maybe that was her way of letting go, not of the past, but of the fear that had kept her heart locked away in the weeks that followed. Evelyn noticed how much lighter everything felt. Her mornings were no longer silent. Her evenings were filled with conversation and music. Daniel never tried to fill the empty spaces left by Michael. He simply stood beside them, honoring what had been while offering what could be. It wasn't a new beginning built on forgetting. It was one built on remembering that love, in all its quiet forms, never really ends. It just changes shape, waiting for someone brave enough to listen again. And as Evelyn drifted to sleep that night, she realized the truth. She hadn't been waiting for love to find her again. She had been waiting to let herself find it. Spring came softly to Portland, wrapping the city in light rain and green. Evelyn Parker could feel the change, not only in the air, but in herself. For months now, her life had begun to bloom again. The quiet sadness that once filled her days had turned into a calm, rhythm morning coffee shared over messages with Daniel, evening walks by the river, Sunday calls with Ethan full of laughter instead of worry. She had stopped counting the years since Michael passed. Not because she had forgotten, but because the ache had finally softened into memory. For the first time in a long while, Evelyn woke up each morning with something to look forward to. It happened slowly, Daniel, becoming part of her everyday life. He'd drop by the library sometimes, bringing her a coffee and teasing her about how seriously she took her work. Other times he'd help her in the garden, sleeves rolled up, dirt on his hands, that same quiet smile always there. Evelyn found comfort in those simple things. There was no rush, no grand promise, just presence, and that was enough. One Saturday, she was baking muffins when Daniel showed up earlier than usual. He leaned against the doorway, watching her with amused eyes. "You know, I think you've officially turned me into a blueberry muffin person," he said. She laughed, handing him one. "Then my job here is done." "Not yet," he said, smiling softly. "I still plan to convince you that coffee tastes better with too much sugar." Their banter was easy, filled with warmth. But beneath it there was something unspoken, something deeper that neither of them pushed too hard to define. They didn't need to. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sky turn pink and gold, Evelyn spoke quietly. "You know, I used to think my life was over in a way, that I had already lived the best years of it. But lately I've realized maybe there's no such thing as too late." Daniel looked at her, his voice gentle. "It's never too late to start feeling again." Evelyn turned toward him. "I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that if I let someone in again, I'd lose the part of me that still belongs to Michael." Daniel nodded, his eyes kind. "You'll never lose that. Love doesn't erase, love it makes room for more." Those words stayed with her. In the quiet that followed, she felt peace settle over her heart. A week later, Ethan came home for a surprise visit. She found him standing in her kitchen, holding a bouquet of daisies. "For you," he said with a grin. "Daisies?" she teased. "You used to call them boring." "I used to call broccoli boring too, and you still made me eat it," he said, pulling her into a hug. "I thought it was time to return the favor." They both laughed. As they sat down for dinner, Ethan looked around the house, the soft music playing, the extra mug on the counter, the warmth in his mother's face, and smiled knowingly. "Mom," he said, "you look happy." Evelyn paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. "Do I?" He nodded. "Yeah, you used to sound tired, even when you were smiling. Now you sound like yourself again." Her heart swelled. She reached over, squeezing his hand. "You have no idea how much that means to hear." Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You know, when I met Daniel, I knew he was different. He talks about life the same way you do, like it's fragile, but still worth every risk." Evelyn smiled softly. "He's been good to me." "But you already knew that." "Maybe," Ethan said, his grin turning mischievous. "But I didn't know you'd be good for him too." Later that night, after Ethan went to bed, Evelyn stepped outside. The moon hung low, silvering the garden. She could still hear faint jazz music playing from the living room. Daniel had given her that record. It's the same one they'd played the night they met. As she stood there, the cool breeze brushing her hair, she felt a familiar presence in her heart, not haunting, but comforting. She thought of Michael, of their years together, of the way he used to hold her hand when words weren't enough. For the first time, the memory didn't bring tears, it brought gratitude. When she turned, she saw Daniel walking up the garden path. He was holding something behind his back. "You didn't tell me you were coming," she said, smiling in surprise. He shrugged. "I figured I'd take a chance." He revealed a small, worn book in his hand. "Ethan told me this was your favorite when you were younger. I found it in a used bookstore." Evelyn took it, running her fingers over the faded cover. "The Bridges of Madison County. I haven't read this in years." Daniel nodded. "It reminded me of us. People who thought the best part of their story had already been written." Her eyes softened. "And maybe it hasn't." They sat together on the porch steps, the night wrapping around them like a quiet song. For a long while, they didn't speak. The silence was full, not empty. Finally, Daniel said quietly, "You know, your son told me once that he just wanted you to be happy again. I think he's succeeded." Evelyn laughed softly. "Yes, though I think he got more than he planned." Daniel tilted his head. "How so?" She looked at him, her voice steady but full of emotion. "He didn't just give me happiness. He gave me back a part of myself I thought was gone, the part that still believes in love." Daniel reached for her hand, holding it gently. "Then I owe him a thank you." They sat there under the stars, their hands intertwined, the air carrying the scent of rain and blooming flowers. The world felt still, yet full of promise. Days turned into weeks, and their lives blended naturally. Daniel would join her for morning walks, bring her coffee at the library, or cook dinner when she was too tired to. There was no grand declaration between them, just steady affection. The kind that grew stronger with every shared laugh and quiet evening. One afternoon, Evelyn found herself helping him fix an old bookshelf. He struggled with a stubborn screw, muttering under his breath, and she laughed so hard she could barely hold the screwdriver. "Are you laughing at me or with me?" he asked, pretending to frown. "A little of both," she said, wiping a tear from her cheek. It was in those small, ordinary moments that Evelyn realized she had found what she'd been missing. Not excitement, not perfection, but peace. A love that didn't rush, didn't demand, just was. Later that evening, Ethan came by again, bringing pizza and that same mischievous grin. Watching her mother and Daniel chatting on the porch, he felt a quiet pride. "You did it, Mom," he whispered when he hugged her goodbye. "You finally let life back in." Evelyn smiled, her eyes warm. "No, sweetheart, you did it. You gave me what I'd been waiting for all my life." That night, as the stars shimmered above and jazz music played softly from the record player, Evelyn rested her head on Daniel's shoulder. The world outside moved on, cars passing, rain starting again, but inside that small home, everything felt perfectly still. Love had come back, not loudly, not suddenly but gently, just as it had left. And in that soft return, Evelyn found everything she had ever been waiting for: peace, hope, and the quiet, enduring joy of a heart finally at home.